The glitz and glamour of modern entertainment frequently create an impenetrable illusion, a dazzling facade that leads the public to believe that those who inhabit the upper echelons of celebrity culture are somehow immune to the profound struggles of everyday existence. For years, audiences have tuned in by the millions to watch the unfolding dramas of high society, captivated by the opulent lifestyles, the sharp-witted exchanges, and the seemingly unbreakable confidence of television icons who completely transformed the landscape of popular culture. These figures became genuine household names, their every triumph celebrated by adoring fans and their every conflict dissected across endless social media platforms and mainstream entertainment news cycles. Yet, behind the carefully curated television edits, the professional studio lighting, and the grand mansions lies a parallel reality that is often far more complex, painful, and entirely unscripted than anything ever captured by a professional camera crew. The bright lights of a television studio can illuminate a face and create an aura of untouchable success, but they often cast a long, deep shadow over the personal lives of the individuals involved, obscuring the deeply rooted familial challenges that persist long after the production wraps, the contracts are signed, and the cameras finally stop rolling. This profound dichotomy between public perception and private torment is a recurring theme in the grand narrative of modern celebrity, serving as a stark, sobering reminder that wealth, influence, and widespread fame are utterly incapable of shielding a family from the devastating consequences of human vulnerability, personal choices, and the relentless grip of destructive cycles that threaten to tear apart even the strongest maternal bonds. To truly understand the immense weight of the events that have recently transpired in the public eye, one must carefully examine the unique environment where these complex narratives are born and nurtured, particularly within the bustling, energetic, and culturally rich landscape of Atlanta, Georgia. This vibrant metropolis has long served as a major focal point for national entertainment, high fashion, and highly influential personalities who have defined the cultural zeitgeist for over a decade, creating a brand of reality television that blended high-stakes drama with genuine human emotion. It is a modern city where reputations are painstakingly built over years of hard work and where the immense pressure to maintain an image of absolute perfection and luxury can become an overwhelming, exhausting burden. Not just for the primary stars themselves, but for the children and extended families who are inevitably drawn into the powerful orbit of their immense public fame. Children who grow up in the immediate vicinity of this intense public scrutiny often face an extraordinary, unfair set of expectations and challenges, navigating their formative and young adult years under a constant sociological microscope where every single mistake, lapse in judgment, or personal crisis can be instantly amplified into a sensationalized national headline. As we delve much deeper into this compelling, developing story of tight family ties, hidden psychological struggles, and the harsh, unvarnished realities that exist far behind the velvet rope of Hollywood fame, we invite you to become a permanent part of our community by subscribing to this channel right now, ensuring that you never miss a critical update as we continue to unravel the intricate layers of this narrative and explore the deeper truths that lie beneath the glittering surface of the entertainment industry. The story we are exploring today is not merely a collection of scandalous headlines or fleeting internet gossip, but rather a profound, tragic exploration of maternal love, systemic challenges, and the agonizing realization that some internal battles simply cannot be won through sheer willpower, public relations campaigns, or financial resources alone. As the years steadily progressed and the initial novelty of reality television stardom began to mature into a permanent fixture of American pop culture, the subtle cracks in this seemingly perfect exterior began to widen significantly, gradually revealing a heartbreaking narrative of quiet desperation and recurring personal turmoil that has slowly culminated in a deeply troubling situation for a family that once seemed to have it all. For a very long time, the television viewing public only witnessed the triumphant moments, the impeccable comedic timing, and the fierce, uncompromising independence of a celebrated matriarch who became absolutely synonymous with the golden era of reality television. A woman whose commanding presence and sharp tongue could easily dominate any room she entered and capture the hearts of millions of viewers worldwide. However, behind that indomitable public spirit and the shield of professional success lay the quiet, exhausting, and emotionally draining burden of a devoted mother watching her firstborn son struggle against powerful internal forces that seemed entirely beyond his control. initiating a painful cycle of legal entanglements and deeply personal setbacks that dates back more than a decade. The early warning signs of this impending crisis were certainly there for those who knew where to look, manifested in standard vehicular infractions, driving under the influence, and minor brushes with local law enforcement that many in the public perhaps dismissed at the time as the typical temporary missteps of youth or the difficult adjustments to an unconventional lifestyle spent in the shadow of an overwhelmingly famous parent. But as time marched relentlessly onward, these seemingly minor legal infractions evolved into a much more serious, entrenched pattern of self-destructive behavior, a downward spiral that would eventually force this prominent television family to confront the darkest, most terrifying aspects of substance addiction and the uncompromising, rigid nature of the modern legal system, setting the stage for a devastating, inevitable confrontation with reality that no amount of fame, money, or maternal protection could ever hope to avert. The delicate facade of stability completely shattered when the underlying personal struggles that had been quietly brewing behind the scenes for years collided head-on with the cold, unyielding reality of the legal system, escalating a series of historical missteps into a full-blown crisis that could no longer be managed or hidden from the public eye. The true depth of this unfolding tragedy began to take a definitive, ominous shape during a routine yet fateful encounter with law enforcement in the summer of 2023. An incident that would forever alter the trajectory of this family narrative and expose the dark, terrifying complexities of a severe substance dependency that had secretly gripped the 36-year-old firstborn son. On that specific occasion, local authorities discovered him in possession of fentanyl, an incredibly potent, deadly synthetic opioid that has ravaged communities across the entire nation and left a trail of unimaginable heartbreak in its wake. The presence of such a highly dangerous substance immediately transformed what might have previously been viewed as a standard substance issue into an incredibly serious, life-threatening legal predicament, underscoring the absolute desperation and the advanced stage of an addiction that had evidently been consuming his life from the inside out. In a moment of sheer panic, confusion, and perhaps an overwhelming desire to shield his true identity from the immediate consequences of the law and the inevitable media firestorm that would follow, the older brother made a desperate, highly controversial decision that would ultimately compound his legal troubles and inject an entirely new level of familial tension into an already volatile situation. He looked the arresting officers in the eye and explicitly claimed to be his younger sibling, Brentt Leakes, weaponizing the clean reputation and name of his own flesh and blood in a frantic, ill-fated attempt to evade personal accountability and manipulate the system. This immediate act of deception, born out of a profound state of panic and the distorting influence of severe substance abuse, initially succeeded in confusing the paperwork, leading local law enforcement officials to officially process and charge him under his younger brother's identity, before the true nature of the identity fraud was inevitably uncovered by administrative checks. The revelation that he had falsely identified himself to officers added a significant layer of legal jeopardy, creating a profound sense of shock and dismay among followers of the family who had watched both brothers grow up on television, and placing an immense unfair emotional burden on the younger sibling whose name had been so carelessly entangled in a serious narcotics investigation. When the legal dust finally began to settle in a Georgia courtroom, a complex plea deal was meticulously negotiated by legal counsel, resulting in the primary, highly serious felony drug charge being officially dropped by prosecutors in exchange for a confession of guilt regarding the secondary infractions. Yet, despite the avoidance of immediate long-term imprisonment at that specific juncture, the judicial system did not let him walk away completely free, instead sentencing the 36-year-old to a strict 12-month period of supervised probation, demanding the immediate payment of a $500 financial penalty, mandating the completion of 40 hours of mandatory community service, and imposing a rigorous schedule of entirely random, unannounced drug screenings. This comprehensive judicial sentence was explicitly designed by the court to serve as a structured framework for personal rehabilitation, a final, legally binding opportunity for an individual standing on the absolute precipice of total self-destruction to finally clean up his life, submit to professional oversight, and actively honor his societal and familial obligations under the watchful, uncompromising eye of the state. However, the structural safety net and the strict boundaries provided by the court-ordered probation proved to be entirely insufficient against the overwhelming, deeply entrenched forces of a long-standing behavioral and chemical addiction that had already taken complete control of his psychological and physical autonomy. As the months rolled slowly by, the optimistic hope that this major legal scare would serve as a powerful, permanent wake-up call began to rapidly evaporate, replaced by a growing, undeniable paper trail of total non-compliance that painted a deeply troubling picture of a man entirely unable or unwilling to meet the basic requirements of his freedom. Official court documents subsequently obtained and published by investigative entertainment journalists revealed a total, systemic failure to fulfill even a single one of the mandatory conditions explicitly laid out in the original 2023 judicial plea agreement. Not only did he completely neglect to complete the 40 hours of community service aimed at restoring his connection to the local community, and repeatedly fail to submit to the mandatory, random drug screenings that were meant to verify his sobriety, but he also completely neglected his fundamental financial obligations toward his own children, utterly failing to pay court-ordered child support. This complete disregard for both the legal system and his personal paternal responsibilities reached a definitive dramatic tipping point on May 1, when law enforcement officials in Georgia officially intervened, executing an arrest warrant for multiple severe probation violations and booking him directly into a local correctional facility, where he has remained securely behind bars ever since. This sudden incarceration marked the definitive end of his temporary freedom, transforming a long history of quiet private interventions into a stark, highly publicized reality where the immediate safety and future of a celebrity's child are now entirely dictated by the rigid, institutional mechanisms of the state prison system. The sudden, dramatic arrest and the subsequent prolonged incarceration immediately sent profound shockwaves through the entertainment world, prompting an absolute frenzy of media inquiries as major news outlets and national tabloids scrambled to secure an official statement or a raw, unfiltered reaction from the famous matriarch, who has spent her entire professional career navigating the intense highs and lows of public scrutiny. Representatives for the 58-year-old television icon were instantly inundated with urgent phone calls, emails, and direct messages from prominent entertainment publications like Page 6, all desperate to know how the fiercely protective, larger-than-life mother was processing this latest incredibly devastating blow to her family's stability and public reputation. Yet, in the immediate, painful aftermath of the booking, the initial response from her camp was a hollow, echoing silence, an incredibly rare and telling occurrence for a public figure who is traditionally known for her absolute candor, her rapid-fire wit, and her total willingness to confront any controversy head-on in front of the cameras. This heavy, prolonged silence spoke far more eloquently than any carefully crafted public relations statement ever could, vividly illustrating the profound, paralyzing sense of maternal exhaustion, heartbreak, and emotional depletion that comes from fighting a losing battle against a child's addiction for more than a decade. It conveyed the painful reality of a mother who had already exhausted her massive financial resources, her emotional reserves, and her public goodwill trying to rescue a son who seemed perpetually destined to fall back into the darkest corners of self-destruction, leaving her completely speechless in the face of an institutional reality that she could no longer fix, fund, or control. To fully appreciate the emotional landscape of this harrowing situation, one must look past the silent wall of public relations defenses and examine the remarkably candid, deeply vulnerable disclosures made by the famous matriarch herself during a period of intense reflection just 1 year prior to this current crisis. In July of 2023, during an incredibly raw and revealing appearance on an episode of the popular entertainment podcast Reality with the King, the former television star chose to completely strip away the protective armor of her celebrity persona to speak directly from the heart of an exhausted, grieving mother. With a level of honesty that stunned listeners and resonated deeply with millions of parents across the country, she openly acknowledged the grim reality of her son's condition, stating without hesitation or sugarcoating that he desperately needs intensive rehabilitation and a massive amount of psychological counseling. Rather than attempting to minimize the severity of the situation or protect the family image with rehearsed talking points, she bravely used her massive platform to shine a necessary light on a painful truth that many families choose to hide in the shadows, pointing out that her household is ultimately no different from countless others across the country who are currently locked in a desperate, seemingly endless battle against the devastating forces of severe drug addiction. She revealed that this was not a sudden, unexpected tragedy, but rather the continuation of a brutal, deeply entrenched cycle that her firstborn son had been actively struggling against for many years. A relentless internal war that had seen him enter various professional rehabilitation facilities multiple times, only to repeatedly face the agonizing heartbreak of a relapse upon his release back into society. This cyclical pattern of hope, followed by immediate devastation, gradually forced a profound psychological shift within the matriarch, leading her to a sobering, incredibly painful realization that serves as a core lesson for anyone who has ever loved someone caught in the unyielding grip of dependency. Through her own extensive personal counseling and the painful wisdom gained from years of failed interventions, she came to understand a fundamental tragic truth about human behavior and recovery. Realizing that she could no longer force her son to save himself from his own destructive choices, she openly confessed to her global audience that she had already spent an astronomical, staggering amount of her own personal wealth over the years in a relentless, desperate bid to secure the absolute best medical care, therapeutic support, and rehabilitation programs available, operating under the maternal assumption that sufficient financial resources and fierce determination could eventually break the cycle. Every single time he had been sent off to a treatment center in the past, it was not because he had reached a point of personal clarity, but rather because she had physically and emotionally forced the issue, demanding that he get up and confront his demons under her direct supervision. This well-intentioned but ultimately futile approach eventually brought her to a state of complete emotional and financial depletion, forcing her to accept the heartbreaking reality that true, lasting behavioral modification cannot be bought, coerced, or orchestrated by a third party, no matter how deeply that party loves the person who is suffering. Her ultimate conclusion was as profound as it was tragic, as she explained that until the individual themselves is genuinely ready to say the words indicating they want to change, there is absolutely nothing a parent can do to alter their predestined path, transforming her role from an active rescuer into a helpless, watchful bystander to her own son's ongoing legal and physical decline. The roots of this complex familial narrative extend deep into the past, anchoring themselves in the early personal history of the family, long before the glitz and glamour of international television fame transformed their daily lives into a matter of public consumption. The 36-year-old at the center of this current legal storm is the biological son of the reality television icon and her former partner, Calvin Bryant, representing a chapter of her life that predated the grand narratives and high society social circles that would later define her public career. This foundational background is critical to understanding the long-term trajectory of the firstborn son, who carried the weight of a changing family dynamic as his mother transitioned from a regular citizen into an absolute titan of modern pop culture, a shift that inevitably altered the environmental pressures surrounding his young adulthood. A careful examination of his extensive public record clearly indicates that his current incarceration is merely the latest, most severe milestone in a highly troubled timeline of legal infractions that began to manifest in the public record nearly 15 years ago. As early as 2011, he faced his first major public embarrassment and legal challenge when he was arrested for driving under the influence, a serious infraction that provided an early, clear warning sign of an underlying struggle with substance management and personal accountability. This initial brush with the judicial system was followed closely the very next year, in 2012, by another arrest for operating a motor vehicle with a suspended license, demonstrating a persistent, deeply concerning pattern of non-compliance with statutory laws and a fundamental disregard for the basic requirements of judicial probations and societal rules that has now culminated in his current status as a long-term inmate within a Georgia correctional facility. The ultimate significance of this ongoing tragedy extends far beyond the boundaries of a single celebrity household or the immediate legal fate of one troubled individual, serving instead as a powerful universal commentary on the democratization of human suffering in the modern era. It stands as an undeniable, sobering proof that the most profound challenges of human existence, specifically the devastating plagues of substance addiction, mental health crises, and systemic behavioral failure, are completely indifferent to the concepts of wealth, fame, societal status, or public adoration. The exact same heartbreaking scenes that play out daily in impoverished communities across the globe, the agonizing telephone calls from local jails, the squandered fortunes, the fractured sibling relationships, and the absolute exhaustion of maternal love can occur just as easily within the inner circles of the Hollywood elite. This narrative forces the viewing public to look into a mirror and recognize the shared vulnerability that connects all human beings, dismantling the comforting but entirely false illusion that success and financial security can somehow buy immunity from the core struggles of the human condition. As this troubled son remains confined behind the cold, uncompromising bars of a Georgia jail cell, stripped of his famous family name and reduced to a standard identification number within the state's penal machinery, the world is left to contemplate the heavy, lingering question of whether this absolute rock bottom will finally provide the catalyst for the genuine, self-motivated transformation that his mother so desperately prayed for, or if it is simply another tragic chapter in an unyielding cycle of generational pain and personal undoing that no amount of stardom can ever hope to cure.